Moscow had previously maintained its flights into Syria, where carrying humanitarian aid only. But now Russia's foreign minister has confirmed military equipment is being sent as well.
Russian planes are sending to Syria both military equipment in accordance with current contracts and humanitarian aid. We have never made our military presence a secret.
Russia has backed the government of Bashar al-Assad since the beginning of the conflict in the country. Moscow sells weapons to the Syrian government and has now disclosed sending military experts to train the army, all, says Lavrov, to fight terror on the ground, carried out by ISIL and others. According to some analysts, Russia's military presence in Syria has grown significantly in recent weeks, including a sharp rise in military personnel, estimated to as many as 3,000.
During last month, there was deliveries of tanks, armored vehicles, and also we delivered components of anti-aircraft system, because it's one of the most necessary points of military deliveries. Of course, with this increase of military deliveries, we increase the number of our military specialists and military advisors to Syria.
The build-up comes as Bashar al-Assad is suffering serious losses on the ground. On Wednesday, the government lost control of a key airbase in Idlib. Some experts believe that without Russia's aid, President Assad would not still be in office. The US and the EU have expressed growing concern over Russia's military build-up in Syria, warning against a further military escalation. However, Moscow insists its activities in Syria are in line with international law and its existing contracts with the Syrian government. Julia Lyubova, CCTV, Moscow.
As Julia reported, Russia's actions in Syria are drawing some familiar battle lines, especially with the United States. CCTV's Roy Ruttenberg is following that part of the story.
Embattled Syrian troops may be getting more than just training from foreign advisors, according to Washington. The U.S. says it fears Russia is sending its own soldiers to Syria to back the Assad government. Russia has long maintained its planes are bringing in humanitarian aid, but this week confirmed military advisors may be on board some flights.
We've asked our friends and partners in the region to ask for themselves, the Russians, some tough questions about what they're doing and what their intent is.
U.S. intelligence officials say the Russians are also bringing in weapons and hardware, making some Western leaders uneasy.
I'm concerned about reports about increased Russian military presence in Syria. That will not contribute to solve the conflict. I think it's important to now support all efforts to find a political solution to the conflict in Syria.
This week, Bulgaria accepted American requests to deny its airspace to Russian cargo planes. Greece has not responded so far to similar U.S. appeals. Turkey in the past has ordered Russian planes to land for inspection. Meanwhile, the skies over Iran remain an open option, and onwards via Iraq. Moscow in the past has said it continues to fill old Syrian defense contracts. The U.S. says Russia is fueling the conflict in Syria, and with it, the country's humanitarian crisis. Over the weekend, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry spoke by phone with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. Kerry reportedly expressed to Lavrov some of Washington's concerns. The two may meet later this month in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly gathering, where no doubt the situation in Syria will take center stage. Roy Ruttenberg, CCTV in Washington.
The United States, like Russia, is firmly committed to fighting ISIL. That raises the question, could the U.S. and Russia end up working together in Syria? We asked a former U.S. State Department spokesman, P.J. Crowley.
Well, when you think of the Islamic State, there is a shared interest there, but then you diverge in terms of what the solution is. The United States and Russia have kind of a Mars and Venus, kind of different perspective on what the conflict in Syria represents. The United States sees the aspirations of people who want self-determination. Russia sees chaos, and in looking at Syria, it sees Chechnya. And so Vladimir Putin believes that Assad is the only one who can keep Syria together and keep the country under control, and he's unwilling, at least up until now, to let go of Assad as his answer to what Syria should look like in the future.
35 years, the Cold War, Russia would do this, the United States would do that. It was more a chess game. Do you see the U.S. getting more involved if Russia gets more involved?
Well, I think obviously the relationship between the United States and Russia is severely strained. There are areas of profound disagreement. Bashar al-Assad being one, Ukraine, being another. That said, the United States and Russia, along with the other members of the P5+1, including China, just helped to negotiate a very significant nuclear agreement, with Iran. So we have this, push and pull. There are areas of cooperation and potentially fighting the Islamic State. That one dimension of the conflict is a shared interest, and that may well be the platform where at some point in time the United States, regional states, Iran, Russia can come to some sort of agreement on the future of Syria. Unfortunately, we're not at that point yet.
I want to cite a couple of things from Pew and Gallup. Pew Research has tracked where Syria's foreign fighters are coming from, excluding the Islamic majority countries. Russia has the most foreign fighters in Syria. So you touched on Chechnya. How serious is this as a concern for Russia, and is this what may be the guiding interest in what they're doing now?
I think when Vladimir Putin looks at what's happened in what we used to call the Arab Spring, he sees chaos, and in seeing chaos in the Islamic world, he thinks automatically of Chechnya, and that has been the foundation of his reaction to try to preserve authoritarian leaders who could keep the lid on various countries, including Syria. That's still the prism through which he sees this conflict. And as long as he sees Assad able to survive, he's likely to continue, to support him.
Gallup did a poll of Americans a year ago asking if they supported Russia's involvement in Syria. 51%, it's more helpful than harmful. When it comes to U.S. involvement, 6 in 10 Americans said they support U.S. military action. Could they, you talked about this push and pull, any possibility the two could come together, work together?
Well, I mean, the complexity of Syria is it's not one conflict, it's several. And so the United States is focused on the Islamic State. However, there are other conflicts, and Russia sees this in different ways. So I think we're not yet at a point where there's enough commonality that there's a change in calculation, whether it's by Russia or by Iran. That is certainly possible over time, and this conversation will continue. But unfortunately, while we think we know the solution, which is a political settlement along the lines of the Geneva Principles, we don't right now have a path that gets us from where we are to that eventual solution.
P.J. Crowley, always a delight. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mike.